All right, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of P100 Training. Today we will focus on the second half of Chapter 3. My name is Tim Hansman, and I'm with Central Office, and along with Karen Demon, who is a workplace specialist and interior designer from Region 8, and Mike Fogel from Central Office and our GSA National Accessibility Officer will present the general architecture, interiors, and accessibility changes for 2024 P100. Our focus is Chapter 3 of the P100, but accessibility, as you can see here, crosses many chapters and topics. Note that the first part of Chapter 3, which has to do with building enclosure, was presented by Jason Danielson back on August 6th. So if you have questions on that portion of the chapter, please refer back to that presentation.
Oops, I think he dropped off for a second.
Yes, that's
I'll add him back in as co-presenter when he comes back on.
great. Thank you.
Apologies, I had a bit of a drop here. Hopefully that won't happen again. Karen, I will need you to reshare with me.
I'm on it.
Thank you.
Trying to. Sorry.
It's fine.
There we go.
Excellent. Thanks. All right, so we will begin with the architecture and interior construction portions. This is the General Architecture Technical Committee, so I had help from David Leitis, Region 9 Regional Chief Architect, who is now with Central Office, and Harvey Maruya, who is the Regional Chief Architect for Region 11 or NCR. These are all the portions of 3.4 in general architecture. Note that this was previously 3.6 in the last version of the P100. So in addition to cornerstones, promotion, use of stairs, what I have here in red are the sections that actually had changes made to them. So we'll just focus on those sections that have changes. Section 3.4.4.6 on wheelchair lifts did not have any changes, but Mike Fogel wants to make some clarifications to that section, so that'll come up in his presentation a little bit later. And Mike will also be covering the family and single occupancy restrooms and the lactation rooms, since the changes in those portions had mostly to do with accessibility issues. All right, so starting out with vertical transportation. It looks like a lot was added here, but really the part that's underlined is the critical element. The underlines are not in the P100, those are just to highlight those main sections. So the first paragraph that was added has to do with the goal of the vertical transportation program, just to set out the overall goals of that program. And then the second paragraph has to do with the vertical transportation subject matter experts, and also their role as the authority having jurisdiction for the vertical transportation program. There is another sentence that was near the bottom there that you can see, where it's actually shortened, which I guess sometimes does happen in the P100. So that is just highlighting some of the fire protection and referring to another section. So under vertical transportation, one of the changes has to do with machine roomless elevators. So there was always a requirement for the SME to approve basically the use of MRL type elevators. And in this case, or in the new update, the hydraulic MRL elevators are basically prohibited, but the traction machine roomless ones are still available to be used, again, with the approval of the GSA Regional Elevator Transportation SME. One of the other issues with the MRLs is because where the controls are located, sometimes those wind up on floors that can't be accessed as easily. So we're trying to avoid technicians who can't get into a Secret Service space or a floor that's high security on a weekend or something like that. So again, the regional elevator SME will be taking a look at where those controls are located if a MRL is considered for a project. Another section is a bird-safe building design. So we just skipped over a couple sections again that Michael will be referring to. So under bird-safe building design, there were some changes. Glass from ground level to a minimum of 75 feet. Previously, that was at 40 feet. And then all glass adjacent to a green roof or partial green roof and up to 3 floors and below or above has been changed. And that's again a change from, I believe, about 15 feet. So those are basically done in line with the American Bird Conservancy has provided new language. They're updating their standards. We refer to their standards. And so therefore, we're bringing those in line. They also align a little bit better with some of the standards that were put in place by New York City. Then we move into the exterior construction performance table. So these tables were broken up. There was a larger table before that had finishes and construction and everything together. And so these have been separated a little bit more strictly into construction and into finishes. And so again, the 4 sections that you see in red are the ones that have received changes. The other ones are basically the same as they were in the previous version. And the changes are fairly minor. Basically, they're meant to bring in some of the new standards that we will also consider, and also just to have less redundancy from other sections. So under metal stud partitions, the green guard gold reference and baseline in tier 2 have been removed from the construction section because they were already in the environmental section. So that was just being cleaned up. And then in the environmental section, under baseline, we've added Indoor Advantage Gold certification in addition to the Green Guard Gold certification as an alternate means of getting a certification. And then again, to avoid redundancy under the plans and specs, we just said yes, they're needed, as opposed to listing Green Guard Gold, providing EPD, which is already labeled elsewhere. Under masonry partitions, pretty much the same type of changes and for the same reasons have occurred there. And then under demountable partitions, an environmental section was added. Previously, there was only a section regarding construction, and very similar for countertops. An environmental section was added for environmental performance on these products. And before on countertops, there was a construction section, durability and quality section. Those have remained the same. In the attributes, and you see pretty much everything that was in the table is listed again in the attributes, but as you might notice, some things changed in the table and they didn't change in the attributes and vice versa. So just be aware of that. So again, there's about 3 sections here in the attributes that have changed. And in general, it's a simplification. So the main text of the attributes has not changed. So for example, under glazed aluminum doors, there was a line that glazed aluminum doors cannot have a fire rating and are not bullet resistance or forced entry protected in the previous version. We're starting to see some products on the market that do meet fire rating, that do meet some of the force protection items. So again, we're trying to leave it more up to our design teams to meet our requirements and open up these products for consideration. Under all glass entrances, we had a little bit of a conflict previously where we were using an ASTM standard, where another section was referring to something very similar using an ANSI standard. So we just have gone with the ANSI standard. Again, it's a change to a reference. And then under aluminum framed interior lights, similar to the glass doors, there was a line in the previous version that said aluminum frame borrowed lights cannot be fire rated. And again, we're finding some products on the market that do meet a fire rating. And again, we're trying to leave that up to our design teams to meet our requirements. All right, with that, before I turn it over to Karen, if there's any questions on the section, and just a reminder that we'll have time for questions at the very end too. So if you want to wait and save all your questions for once, especially if they cover multiple categories, just please let us know.
Currently, we have no questions. Thank you.
Excellent. So I will hand it over to Karen.
Thanks, Tim. First, I kind of wanted to mention my background. We have a ribbon cutting on Thursday here at the Denver Federal Center at Building 48. So this is, I think, what's called the Forest in this new beautiful building that used to be warehouse space for NARA. So that's what I'm highlighting behind me. We're going to talk about the changes that were made in the interior design section. We're going to focus on the performance table mostly because that's where most of the changes were made. And then the rest will kind of highlight pretty quickly. So I'm going to recognize my committee team members. It's myself, Leah Spilling, Liz Kahn, Cassie Phillips, and Mark Nyquist. But I wanted to give a special shout out to Rebecca Stevens, who just retired from the Office of Acquisition Management. I couldn't have done this without her and her passion for sustainability, so I definitely didn't want to leave her off this. Just like Tim had kind of mentioned, all the products from interior finishes was put into their own performance table. And I didn't highlight which sections were changed because some verbiage was changed kind of throughout the entire table. And so we're going to go through some of those. I'm going to talk about my goals when we were looking at what to change. And so one goal, obviously we're trying to make this P100 and these tables just more clear to help to other people to understand them. And so kind of like our plain language training that we all love so much, I tried to do more lists and less like run-on sentences when providing the requirements. Try to combine information when possible, and then consistency with the other tables in the P100. So again, like Tim had said, instead of restating what requirements were in the plans and specs, we said yes, and things like that. Just trying to be more consistent throughout the P100. Another goal we had was to protect the government's investment. So when we're talking about product warranty or product service life, we really wanted to try to cover the life cycle, to say, for a product. So an example of this is we changed the carpet warranty requirement from the previous P100 from a 10-year commercial warranty to a commercial limited lifetime warranty that includes materials, freight, and labor. We also tried to capture some logic when we're talking about warranties and added some language about owner project requirements or OPRs that help capture the functional requirements of the particular project. So, our government's investment is always important. But along with that, there are things we could not change at this point. When there were suggestions from industry experts, we look at these things very carefully and take into consideration what they're suggesting. And this is important because, the government is the largest buyer in the world of products. And so what we do makes a big difference and carries a lot of weight and influence the market. And so obviously we all want to be making more sustainable decisions and conscious decisions. But there was, like, for an example here, there's a suggestion for to require manufacturers to offer an end-of-life reclamation program for LVT. That sounds great, but when we did the research, it was still like unfair to the rest of the market. Not enough companies were doing this yet. I'd love to make that change and go down that road next time. And so hopefully more people will get on board, but those were just some things we wanted to think about, as always, the balance of what we're requiring and then the availability in the market. So this is Michael, our ABAS extraordinaire, wanted me to mention. This flooring is not, it's not compliant. It probably does not have the, but I wanted to add it because it's funny. And, but it doesn't meet like slip resistance or abrasion compliancy. So I make sure I mention that for Michael's benefit. But we have, so another goal we had was to try to make like materials have the same standards when we're talking about environmental standards or eco thanks, Michael, eco labels. And so when you're looking for like products, a rubber product or a linoleum, they don't contain vinyl. We tried to make all those eco labels the same for all those 3 products. And then if a product does have a vinyl in it, a flooring product, we wanted to make it, to simplify it a little bit. So all of those will have the same environmental standards. And then we were able to do the same thing with combining porcelain, quarry, and mosaic. And so I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Yes? Roland?
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask, is chat available? I had a question I wanted to ask, and I tried to put it in chat, and it said it's not available.
Yeah, chat's not available. You'll have to put it in the Q&A, and you can find that down in the bottom right corner of your screen. It has a triangle, square, and circle. You click that, it'll open up, and you'll have Q&A as an option. You can type your question in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here is an example of the environmental section for a product. And so you can see what we did here. Previously, the baseline tier 2 and tier 3, some of it was repetitive. And so if the baseline was the same as tier 1, instead of repeating it, we just said NA. And to just try to, again, like simplify. And something else we did was, previously the eco labels, we were saying NSF 332 or cradle to cradle and green guard gold or indoor. So there was a lot of ands and ors. And so we were trying to organize this in a meaningful way. And so you understood, you know, okay, we need a multi-attribute certification required. And here's what, out of that multi-attribute certification, here's what we accept. Same with indoor air quality certifications. Here, one of these will accept. And then whether an EPD, environmental product declaration, is required, and here's what is required. And then again, you can see under plans and specs, instead of repeating, oh, you know, submit these certifications, we just said yes. And then, so something else I want to highlight on here that we added under references is the SFTool in the green procurement compilation. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with that, but it's something very exciting I've been working on as well. We are getting in this tool, which is free for GSA and others to use. It's just online tool. And we are getting a P100 button. And so what this will do is instead of having to review the P100 and then click all the different eco labels and like an EPD that's required for a certain product, you can see under carpet, there was, C2C, a cradle to cradle, clicked, an NSF 140, and an EPD. Now you just have to click the P100 button and it will filter all of that for you. And what's so great about this as well is that, sustainability changes constantly, terms, needs, it's always evolving. And so working with the manufacturers in the SFTool, they update their information monthly to this, the SFTool and the Green Procurement compilation. And so we know this should always be the most up-to-date, even when we can't update the P100, but every 3 years, this P100 button should have the most up-to-date sustainability requirements. Remember, this doesn't capture like the durability or those other aspects, performance aspects in the table, but it does capture the environmental labels and things that we are requiring at GSA in the P100. So let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So let's see. Okay, so next, kind of what that last slide was showing is trying to make the P100 more of a living document, trying to capture change as it happens. So one thing we changed this time around, we looked for were ways when it comes to maintenance and cleaning of products. This was a way we thought we could, instead of stating like for resilient flooring, the maintenance requirements of an ASTM test, let's go with what the manufacturer recommends. So we change it to product maintenance per manufacturer recommendations and product application requirements. And the reason this makes so much sense is because technology is changing, because manufacturers have different ways of cleaning their product or maintaining their product. It leaves it up to them to tell us the best way to maintain their product once it's installed. And so again, just something else we thought was less prescriptive and try to go change with the times. So the other sections in chapter 3 related to interior finishes is the performance attributes. This is a very small section. A few notes were added here that weren't covered in the table. And then we also actually reduced a lot of language that was repetitive. So as to not to make mistake in two places or, So just trying to again, simplify it. And the interior requirements, I just wanted to touch, I'm not sure if everybody knows this is in here, but it reviews acoustics. And there's a lot of great information in this chapter 3.9.1. If you're looking for acoustic requirements and information there. And then this last section is near and dear to my heart, being on the workplace team and an interior designer. And I think it's extremely important for everybody to know is in here is our workplace requirements. There's so much great info in here. It kind of relates back to a lot of our workplace 2030 tools. And I suggest everybody kind of review this if you're interested. And if you have questions, please reach out to your workplace design team or Center for Workplace Strategy. So at this point, are there any questions for me? Let me look in
Thank you, Karen. Yes, there's 3 questions. It says, the first one says, if an option isn't widely available in the market, shouldn't we use GSA's purchase power to push that change along?
I agree, but there's a balance there of making a monopoly and making sure enough we're not cutting out the little guys, because that we're about small businesses as well. And so it is constantly And it may not, so right now with that P100 tool, it's covering the baseline requirement in a product. So that is something we can look at in maybe a higher tier if you want to go above and beyond and get extra credit when you're looking at those things. But yeah, I mean, I agree. We do want to push that and try to lead the path, and but there is like a balance of, and so that's why we do the research when those things are suggested to see if there's enough competition out there.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Roland asked, what is the standard for slip resistance for floor finishes?
I'll have to go to the table for that and maybe ask Michael. It's probably different for each material. Yeah.
Okay. And then the
Yeah,
last,
there, ABAS does not provide a specific coefficient of friction. That is a local jurisdiction. So either through IBC or ICC, you'd find that information out.
and that was
And
the
it's
last
just-
comment. John says should be expressed as a coefficient of friction. So thank you. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I do think that that floor I showed was a little too slippery. That cat was all over the place. Sorry. Okay.
Thanks.
I'm gonna
That's all the
introduce-
questions.
What was that?
That's all the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I'm going to introduce Michael now. Let me move on to your slides, and I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, Karen. That was a great presentation on interior revisions and challenges. And thanks, Tim, for his overall architectural review. And now it's, I appreciate my opportunity to talk about accessibility and how accessibility is basically throughout the P100, and we did make some significant changes to P100 to either define accessibility a little bit more, or the types of accessibility we're looking for, but also to try and understand how some of our DEIA plans or strategic plans can be applied to the P100 and to our facilities. And so in our first wave of looking at our strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the cornerstones of that strategy is for outreach to underserved communities and integration with the surrounding communities for our facilities, either new facilities or altered facilities. We are one of the ways that we try to become inclusive to the surrounding neighborhoods is through adding passenger loading areas, accessible passenger loading areas on the perimeter of our facilities, our new facilities if possible. A great example is our brand spanking new Fort Lauderdale courthouse that is going up right now. They have a great passenger loading area next to an accessible right up to the building, which is a great shining example of integrating with the communities around us and working with people who don't necessarily have cars and drive cars to these facilities, and ride share and also paratransit. Also, the connections to trans lines and to different parts of the existing transit infrastructure, looking to find ways to create accessible routes from these side arrival points. So we're kind of highlighting some of these and trying to be more inclusive in our access to the site. And then from the site up, of course, on all our facilities, we have accessible routes, accessible paths of travel. And so one of the other things that we are looking at here in accessibility is the access to our facilities. And now that we have a lot of courthouses going in, we have a lot of courthouses that are being planned, and we talk a lot about access to the judges' benches, because the judges' benches are usually a couple of feet above the floor. I mean, based on the hierarchy of the court, and the judges' benches with respect to the other judiciary and also to the public. And that one of the reasons I bring up our 3.4.6 under the vertical transportation is that after this P100 was issued, we looked at wheelchair lifts, and this is an existing element, but we're looking at here at the accessibility office to work closer together with the vertical transportation subject matter expert for them to help us in our review of accessibility to the judges' benches. And because one of the things we're finding out is that because our ABAS requirements only require adaptability or an adaptable vertical access or vertical circulation to the judges' bench. And what that means is that they don't necessarily have to be accessible, which means a ramp or a lift, but it needs to be adaptable, so they could put a ramp or a lift in at a later date at the request of the tenant. But what we're finding is that that whole adaptability element is just being completely dropped out of the design, and if left to the design of the judiciary, they would omit any type of accessibility to the judge's bench at all and consider it a nuisance. But we're finding that after years of our federal courthouses are open, well, some of the judges are becoming disabled or fully disabled, and so they're looking for these judges' benches to provide accessibility. And so when we look at the wheelchair lifts in 4.6.6, there GSA recommendations and GSA policy is to not provide platform lifts, but to provide ramps to these spaces. Now, that means to design for a ramp and adaptability and not necessarily design for wheelchair lifts. And so that's something that we're going to be kind of taking a very proactive approach in discussing with the designers of the courtrooms, either through adaptable or actual accessible, using ramps as opposed to wheelchair lifts, because wheelchair lifts and chair lifts, if for no other reason, they are an incredible maintenance headache. And they're out mostly, and if not in. A question about what if you don't have space for ramps? Well, in a design or in a new design, then the ramps would be incorporated in an alteration. We would try to be as accessible as possible. So I mean, if it's technically infeasible in an alteration to put in a ramp, then obviously we would I'd be as accessible as we could. But in new construction, we would be working with the transportation, and accessibility to see how we can provide ramps to the judge's bench. And we're doing it now. I mean, there's plenty of courtroom facilities that have this design in place. And we're just trying to codify that as best we can. So that's me just, talking about some of the issues that we're having with the accessibility and adaptability in the courts, and how GSA is trying to, our P100 overlay is trying to address that and become as accessible as possible. And so now let's get into the family single occupancy restroom. And I know that this section has been changed quite a bit. And we did this for reasons for clarity reasons, if nothing else, but also because of us trying to become more inclusive, and we're trying to add elements to be able to accept a broader part of the population. And so, if you see in the up in the upper part of this description, we are looking at putting in single occupancy family restrooms And then what is the tripping point for that? And we add a 50% for alterations. We look at for new construction, 1 per floor. But what I wanted to talk about here is that even though we say 1 per floor, that single occupancy restroom has to be available to everybody on that floor. Now, we've had, especially in our LPOEs, we've been talking about there's a lot of back of house, there's a lot of CPS, federal workforce, and then you have the public, and providing one single occupant restroom accessible to all, and what it boils down to is it's just for the public. It's not available to the to the federal workforce. So we look to try and add either 2 or try to co-locate a single occupancy restroom so that both the public and the workforce can use it. So that's an important aspect to all of our facilities. I've been checking a lot of facilities, and they seem to omit the single family restrooms on 1 or 2 floors. So that's an important aspect of clarification, but also through alteration, where we say that if you're altering a floor, what's the tripping point for adding a single occupant restroom? And we work very hard to determine that if 50% of the floor area is being altered, then an inclusion of single family restroom is required. Now, obviously, they can add that without that tripping point. And in historic structures, typically they would add a single family restroom if they cannot alter the existing historic bathrooms. Question, sorry, why would the public? Why would the public one not be available to staff? Well, to get a lot of times the public restroom is only available, or the public restroom is only available through the public area. I mean, the staff could obviously get to it, but they'd be walking through the public like waiting areas to get to the space or go outside and around. Okay, another question, this may not be necessarily accessibility related, but with a single occupancy restroom, are we implementing any sort of standard gender neutral signage? If you review the 3.4.5, there are elements there when you talk about door signage, there are elements that we are following. First, there is the ISA symbol, International Symbol of Accessibility. Then there is a designation for as a single occupant restroom. We try not to provide any gender specific nomenclature or pictograms for that. And then we ask for a pictogram of the availability of a changing station. So 3 elements to our signage, but we also try to omit any reference to a gender specific or any gender type of pictograms on the signage. And so, as you can see, those are in those 2 highlighted areas. And then we get down to the changing stations, and this is where the restrooms at the single occupant family restrooms are public facing, and except areas where the occupant load is 50 or more, we are asking for the presence of a universal changing station, which is basically the quote unquote an adult changing station, which is a bit larger, handling a heavier load, and is adjustable. And so that would obviously make the single occupant restrooms a little bit bigger. But at this point, we're dipping our toe into this adult changing station. That would be only for the public facing single occupant restrooms. And so, and then one of the last elements that we want to talk about today is the lactation rooms. And the lactation rooms come from us from the Affordable, the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. And we want to be consistent with these requirements. The Fairness for Breastfeeding Mothers Act of 2019 requires that certain public buildings that are open to the public and contain a public restroom provide a lactation room other than a bathroom that is hygienic and available. And then and then it says, and then also per USC 218D, nursing employees, which is our workforce, have the right to a reasonable break time in place other than bathroom that is shielded from view and free from intrusion. So to express milk while at work. So when you add all these things together, then we come up with what we call a single station lactation room. And then we have the if you look in the parentheses, the room requirements are all the same. The elements of the lactation room have not changed. The lactation room, minimum 5x7 footprints, a the number of lactation stations, or actually lactation stations, or in a table, minimum requirements, lockable door, comfortable chair, utility type sink, storage for cleaning supplies, provisions for towel dispensers, mirrors, a bulletin board, well-placed electrical, milk storage, so maybe a mini fridge, signage to identify it, and accessibility must be met for all common features in the room, so reach, ranges, etc. Now, what we see here on this page, there has been an overlay for providing electrical, HVAC, and lighting in accordance with Chapter 5 and Chapter 8. And these elements go on to talk about thermostat adjustment, noise control, non-glare lighting fixtures, and also providing electrical loads, accommodating the refrigerators, the milk pumps, etc., so that you can plug in your phone. So this HVAC and lighting and electrical is in support of the bullet points that are in the P100 right now. Sure, that one. So, and so one of the last things I just want to talk about, I know we're kind of running out of time. Oh, there's another question. What would be considered a comfortable chair? I guess, well, a chair that somebody could probably sit in for 10 to 20 minutes at a time without, feeling like they're falling out of it, or without thinking that it is uncomfortable to sit in. So this is a very subjective determination, but I would think something with some padding and with a hand rests or arm rest would be a comfortable chair, as opposed to a fold out metal chair sitting in a corner. That would be my guess on that. And so then, and to end my discussion, there is a section that has moved from the electrical section to our specialty design construction or design area in our Chapter 8, and a section for EV, electric vehicle supply equipment, and quite a bit of discussion about the fire life safety aspects, quite a bit of discussion about the particulars, the electrical aspects, and also a lot of discussion about the accessible aspect to the EV supply equipment and what their requirements are on the site. So please, and we did a presentation on that, but I just wanted to bring it up in my discussion with accessibility, since it is the elements in that section do relate to accessibility to a greater extent, and just letting everybody know that there wasn't a previous presentation, but please refer to 8.5.5 for information on the GSA policy for accessible charging stations. And I see one other question. I'm about to start an interior renovation project next month. The construction drawings were completed a year ago. Do they need to be revised to reflect these new requirements before construction begins? Obviously, a contractual question that, from my understanding, if the contract was signed, depending on when it was signed, what P100 was applicable at the time, but there is verbiage in the P100 and any P100 stating that they would there is an opportunity to upgrade to the latest P100. And I don't know, Tim, if you could speak to that more, or maybe we could ask some of the people on this call here.
No, I think you're correct in that when the contract is signed, that's the P100 that's in effect. Yes, you can always use the newer version. That same thing with IBC codes and so forth. That's usually the standard practice.
Okay, thank you. And so, to Tanya, what is the recommendation for including adult changing station into a single occupancy public restroom? Shouldn't they be limited to medical care facilities rather than all federal facilities? Well, good question. And we discussed that, and what we are finding, and through our discussions in the regions and the feedback we're getting, is that a lot of people who are using these, the public who are using the federal facilities, a lot of them are, not a lot of them, but there is a percentage of them who are disabled who have attendants with them. And there's being a larger percentage of people who would not require, but would be appreciative of a adult changing station, which would make it easier to, for them to sit down, to rest, and also to go through a changing process if need be. So we saw this as something, with or without our aging population, as something that would be more inclusive, and thought and believe that this is kind of like where we see the future going. Any other questions out there, either for me or Tim or Karen? We left about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I know I was answering some questions along the way, but please feel free to, if there's anything else.
We did such a good job. There's no questions.
I'll just answer along the way. So,
all right, thank you guys for a great presentation. Again, the recording will be posted in approximately a week, and the slides most likely by tomorrow on gsa.gov and on Insight. So, if there are no more questions, I'm going to end the recording and end the meeting. Thank you to our presenters.
all right,
Tim, Mike,
thank you.
Thank you all.